Welcome to rePROs Fight Back, a podcast where we explore all things reproductive health, rights, and justice. I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and I'll be helping you stay informed around issues like birth control, abortion, sex education, and LGBTQ issues, and much, much more. Giving you the tools you need to take action and fight back. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, rePROs. How's everybody doing? I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and my pronouns are she, her. So, y'all, there's been so much happening and so much stress with all of the things. This year and a half has been exhausting, and, it's been really hard to prioritize taking time off and prioritizing my own mental health. That's not something I'm super great about. So I took a mental health day early last week, and it was delightful. I didn't really do anything, really exciting. I didn't look at my emails. I mostly avoided social media. And so it was delightful to have a long weekend. But, it was important not just for me and for my mental health. I'm also in a management position at work, and to me that means I also need to be leading by example. It's all great if I tell my people that report to me that they need to take time off and, take care of their mental health, and, taking mental health days is important, and please feel free to do them. But if I'm not doing the same, they may not feel like it's actually encouraged. So I'm really trying to be much better about it and do the lead by example thing, right? So taking the time off so that others will as well. And that way we are all supporting and taking care of each other. So that is something I am trying to work on right now, is being better and taking more time away. This work will continue whether I am there or not. And so it is better to take the time and take care of myself so that I am here for the long haul, because as this episode will show you, there is a lot going on and a lot to do and a lot that we are stressed about. But if I'm not in a good place to fight and to help, that doesn't help anybody. So it's really important that I am not just prioritizing my mental health, but trying to encourage those on our staff and other people to prioritize theirs as well. We need to really take care of each other and find what works for you. So it's just, I've talked about like the things I do to try and take care of my mental health. And I feel like one of the ways I could tell that I have been, burning out a little bit is that, even the things I normally do that I find relaxing. So, I've talked a lot about my baking adventures, is like the last couple of weeks, I have just like not wanted to do it. Like I'm just even at the point that like things that are normally relaxing for me, I've just been like, ugh, that just sounds terrible. So, the last couple of weeks, I haven't done any baking. I mean, I baked something from a box mix one weekend, which, was delightful and delicious, but, not the same as what I've been doing. And I need to be taking care of myself so that way I can do the things that normally make me happy. So that's my goal, is to be better about it all. So hopefully, putting that out here will also help me hold myself accountable, right? You all know that I'm trying to do it. So maybe they'll make me more likely to do it and step up and lead by example. So this week's episode, I am super excited about. I got to talk to the wonderful Jessica Mason Pieklo at Rewire News Group. We talk about a lot of very stressful things. I'm sorry, y'all. This is definitely not one of the upbeat episodes, but it's a really important one. And we really kind of get into the weeds on a couple of things. We talk about the Texas abortion law that is not in effect yet, but is really big, and why it's so different and so scary. And we also talk about the upcoming abortion-related Supreme Court case that they will be hearing this fall, and everything in between. So it's a wonderful conversation, but like I said, a little stressful, but we do have lots of things recommended that you can do to, take back some of that helplessness, and actions you can take at the end. So I hope you all enjoy my wonderful conversation with Jessica Mason Pieklo. Hi, Jess. Thanks so much for being here today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me back. It's always so much fun to chat.
I know. I am so excited to talk to you about this. I mean, it's all terrible, but like of the people to talk to, I'm really excited to have you here to break this down. So let's start with what. So Texas passed this new extreme abortion ban. What is it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. First of all, Texas, we love you. I feel like I should say that like at
Yeah.
the upfront because we're about to really get into it with what's going on in the state. And I don't want folks to feel like we feel a way about Texas other than a lot of love. But the lawmakers in Texas are a little bit off the chain. So they passed an abortion ban, which should sound familiar, right? Texas is frequently in the business of passing abortion bans.
If there's one thing you know about Texas,
they like abortion bans. So this one is particularly bonkers by even Texas's standards. So we can break it down a little bit. So first of all, it purports to ban abortion at about 6 weeks. So that's when most people don't know that they're pregnant at that point. I tell this story frequently. You know, I have had 2 pregnancies that went to term, and the second one, you'd think that like by the second one, I'd have some sense of what was going on. No, I was fully a month further along in my pregnancy than I thought I was by the time I actually figured out what was going on, much to the surprise of everybody who was involved in that situation. So, 6 weeks is really at a time when most folks don't realize that they're pregnant. And importantly, it's at a time that first like 10-week window is at a time when most folks are actually terminating pregnancies in Texas as well. So when we talk about it being a total ban, that's not really a total ban. That's a total ban, right? Like if you don't know you're pregnant and also you're timed out when by the time you find out, that works as a total ban. Okay, so that's bad. But that's not unusual. Lots of states have tried to ban abortion at 6 weeks. And, federal courts have said, no, that's a pre-viability abortion ban, and those are unconstitutional. So no, but Texas's bill does something very different. And this is what's so alarming. And it's a little bit in the legal weeds. So normally laws like this, abortion bans, require a state actor to enforce it. Who's a state actor? That's someone like the attorney general, a prosecutor, somebody who represents the government to come in and say, hey, you're doing something in violation of this statute and don't do that, right? Like that's a very sort of like baseline example. What this statute does, though, is empower basically anyone, strangers, to enforce the law. And so Amani Gandhi and I over at Rewire News Group talk about this as sort of deputizing citizens to enforce laws. And we don't do this. Like uniformly, we have agreed that this is not a good idea, right? We don't want random folks just feeling like they are empowered with the authority of the state to go in and tell people to stop doing things. That usually doesn't work out well for folks who, happen to be women, folks who don't identify as cis white guys, and that's what Texas's law does. Now, the good news is Texas's law is not yet in effect. It's set to take effect September 1st. Advocates have filed a lawsuit challenging it. And so we hope that a federal court will block this law because it's blatantly unconstitutional and it's a wild power grab by anti-choice forces in the state. But that remains to be seen if that'll happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, both parts of the law are terrible. And I think, something we always talk about on the show is like, these abortion bans aren't happening in a vacuum. So like, not only are you pregnant at 6 weeks and may not know it, but like Texas has a waiting period. Like there's not a lot of clinics after so many had to close, before the whole women's health decision. Like it's, you have to make 2 long trips. So like, it's just this like no easy access. And now they move the timetable back. So like on its own, just that part is terrible.
It is. And this bill, even if it doesn't take effect, has already moved the window in terms of the conversation around what folks who aren't engaged in this issue on the day-to-day, like you and I and the folks who listen to this podcast are. What it's done is in their mind shifted that Overton window also, because folks are talking about 20-week bans, right? Like 20-week bans are things that the courts may be asked to uphold. And if you are somebody who is casual consumer of news, for example, and identifies as pro-choice, to you, 20-week abortion ban may sound totally reasonable when compared to a 6-week abortion ban, even though out of the gates, they are both from the jump unconstitutional. And so in the media, we have so much work to do just to explain that. And folks are tired right now. They are overwhelmed. I mean, we were chatting before we hit record about like, oh my gosh, thank you for all the grace you've shown me just trying to schedule this, because my life as a person in the pandemic with kids right now is total chaos. And so like, these are the things that keep me up at night as we're talking about the Texas case and the Texas law, because so much damage has been done without the law even taking effect. We ran a piece about how, recently folks were like, I guess Texas has banned abortion, and people don't know that it's not in effect, despite all of the ways we try to, inform people and do all of that. And so, just as the narrative continues, not just around Texas, but, as the Supreme Court gears up to hear oral arguments in Jackson's Women's Health, like the conversation around abortion is going to just get stickier and messier, particularly for the people most impacted by it. And I'm stressed.
Yeah, and you raise a really good point, because like we've definitely seen this happen in like the way media covers it, right? There's this bright new shiny 6-week abortion ban, and everybody freaks out because rightly it's basically a complete ban on abortion. And then it doesn't pass, or now it does, but then the state then passes like a 15-week ban or a 20-week ban, and it gets like this little like flip of coverage. And so you may not know that, oh, this other ban that is just as unconstitutional was also passed.
Right. Right. And, we saw it with the Texas bill. I saw a lot of reports about how, there's a bounty associated with this, like to effectively turn people in and get paid 10 grand as a result of it. That's terrifying, right? And so, but we also have to be reporting that responsibly within the media, because one thing that I will say for certain, as someone who has spent over a decade in this space in the media, is that we're going to see copycats of this, right? There is no reason to think that there is not a lawmaker in another state, albeit, whether it's going to be Kentucky, whether it's going to be Arkansas, whether it's going to be South Dakota, North Dakota, Missouri. Like, we can go through them to say, what's a really good idea for our next legislative session? Abortion bounties.
Oh, yeah, we for sure see that, right? Like, abortion reversal shows up in one state, and now like all these other states have like proposed it.
Exactly.
Which, just to caveat, it is not a thing. It's not real. Just putting that out there. I'm sure that most of the listeners know, but it's not.
Never hurts to reinforce.
Yes. But yeah, so, and again, like the bounty is getting all of the attention, and I think maybe it's worth talking about a little bit of like what this would mean for providers, for abortion funds. Like, 'cause it is pretty wide ranging, because it's not just the patient or the clinic, or it can impact a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, really, the goal, it appears, by anti-choice lawmakers in drafting this kind of language is to cast as wide a net as possible. So, the law talks about things like aiding and abetting, when that's functionally the legal term for helping. Right. So think of aiding and abetting somebody getting an abortion and all of the ways that you can help someone, whether that is direct aid in the form of financial services via abortion funds, or transportation, or gift cards to pay for groceries, which are things that, for example, direct aid services can often help with, because it's not just paying for the cost of the procedure. If you've got 2 round trip trips, you've got to take time off work, like transportation expenses, hotel rooms, food for your other kids, because we know most people who have abortions already have children at home. So all of those things, if you are in that pool of social services functionally, then you could be swept up in this. if you are in the business of giving folks information, you could be swept up in this. And that's really terrifying. Now, there's a lot of reasons to believe that all of those overreaches are unconstitutional. And really, we have to hope that the federal courts do their job here. But that's also a really good opportunity for us to talk about the fact that we should not be hoping that our institutions hold the bare minimum, not even the bare minimum. Like, this is begging for table scraps, right? To like not have a bounty put on my head for offering services to folks to access healthcare, right? Like, I don't know. I've lost my words. I'm so upset by all of that. But it's, but that's just to really color in the lines for folks who may be like overreacting or like really, we're used to, unfortunately, providers being targets. We're used to patients, unfortunately, increasingly becoming targets. This is really the first time that anti-choice lawmakers have said, if you are in the business at all of even acknowledging reproductive health care exists and people are entitled to it, we are coming for you.
Okay, so what would this mean for people living in Texas if this were to go into effect, right? Like, so we've talked about the providers and to people offering aid, but what would this mean for people who need access to abortion care?
I think it means that most people will be leaving the state. If we're talking practically, you are really faced with terrifying legal landscape. And that's the point, right? The lawyers talk about these kinds of laws having chilling effects on the exercise of rights. And that's really what this is about, right? This is, this Texas law is a statewide version of a local ordinance that was passed in Lubbock to declare Lubbock a sanctuary city for the unborn, right? And so this sounds like a political stunt, and in a lot of ways it is. Other cities in Texas had tried this before, but what was different in Lubbock was that they actually had an abortion provider in Lubbock. So this was the first time where, local ordinance like this had actually put a very specific target on a provider as opposed to just a sort of aspirational nonsense. Texas took that Lubbock ordinance and applied it to the state. And so if I'm a provider, I would be looking very seriously about whether or not I am continuing to do business in the state. That's a chilling effect, right? If I'm an abortion fund, I am going to be looking very practically if it makes sense for us to continue to operate. And that's not to say that people should be shutting down. We don't want any of that. But Jenny, this is a conversation, right? Like this is what the anti-choice community is forcing us to have these conversations. And so here in Colorado, we know, for example, that when the state screwed around with abortion access in the first wave of COVID shutdowns, we had a flood of patients come to Colorado from Texas. And I mean, it's documented. It's not like we had to guess about that. They're like, nope, we can't get care in Texas, so we have to go to Colorado. That's expensive. It also puts a burden here on us in Colorado. Not that we won't take patients who need care. We'll take whatever patients we can. But there are only so many providers across the country to go around. And so, we are going to see the regional points of access that are already stressed become even more stressed as people are looking to go out of state, because where do people from Texas travel to? Travel Colorado, New Mexico, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Illinois? Those are far distances. Texas is really big.
Yeah. And again, that just heightens already existing disparities, right? So the people that are going to travel are the people who can afford to travel. And that leaves behind a whole bunch of people who probably were already struggling to access care in the state.
Yeah.
And it just leaves so many already marginalized people behind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing good.
Okay. So clear. Abortion is still legal in Texas. Please, you can still go. It's still legal in all 50 states.
Yes.
And there is a lawsuit in the works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that brings us to the next big bucket of nerves. And that's talking about there's a big abortion case that's coming up before the Supreme Court this fall.
There really is.
Okay.
Like the biggest one in 50 years.
I mean, I'm stressed, Jess.
I'm not going to tell you not to be stressed.
Yeah.
This is a time to stress. If ever there was a time to stress about the future of abortion rights as far as the federal courts are concerned. I mean, it was 10 years ago, but now really it's now. Like, there's no hyperbole here. It's a direct challenge to Roe versus Wade. There is a coordinated political campaign going on in the briefing, and it mirrors attacks that we've seen in places like the Voting Rights Act, for example. So it's a playbook. And the difference is there is a solid 6-3 anti-abortion majority on the Supreme Court. So that means that we're not even playing for the margins, mostly.
Okay.
Sorry.
So tell us a little bit about this case and why it is so scary.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like I need to do
I know,
a cleansing
right?
breath.
Like, deep breath, everybody. Sorry.
It's really bad, though. So, I mean, so most folks probably know this case involves a law out of Mississippi. Mississippi tried to ban abortion at 15 weeks, right? So when we were talking about that Texas ban, and folks are like, I don't know, 15 weeks seems reasonable. Look at what Texas is doing. We're going to see that argument. We will see in the fall when the Supreme Court hears this case. Folks say the Mississippi ban is totally reasonable because all of these other states are out of their minds doing this stuff. So I just want folks to be prepared for that because it's going to happen and it's going to be successful in some circles. So the Mississippi law tries to ban abortion at 15 weeks. There is absolutely no disagreement in the federal courts that this is unconstitutional. And what do I mean by that? I mean that there is not a single federal court opinion that has upheld this Mississippi law. And I'll even go further. There is not a single federal court opinion that has upheld any law like Mississippi's at all. None. Okay. So despite how conservative the federal courts are, despite, I've got an entire brand built around talking about how bad the federal courts are for rePRO, the reality is the federal courts have looked at laws like this and said, no, they don't fly. Why don't they fly? Because Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey say that they don't fly. So that's where we have been up until May, when the Supreme Court said, you know what? We want to take a look at this. So why is that alarming? Well, because no federal court thinks that this is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court is a court of what lawyers call limited jurisdiction. So that means that there are only a couple times or a couple ways in which the Supreme Court gets to flex its power. And one of those ways is when the federal courts are in disagreement around issues of constitutional law. We call that a circuit split. So if, for example, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals had said, we love Mississippi's 15-week ban, totally let that thing go into effect, but the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals had said, Idaho's 15-week ban, Idaho doesn't have a 15-week ban, I'm doing a hypothetical here, Idaho's ban is bad, we're not going to let that go into effect. That would be a circuit split. And that would make sense for the Supreme Court to step in and say, you know what, we have some federal courts saying this law is constitutional, and we have other federal courts saying an identical law is unconstitutional. That causes confusion. We need to settle that, right? Didn't exist here. The other thing that should really terrify folks, and this is a little bit of a soundbite, but it's a true soundbite, is that it takes 4 justices to decide to take a case, but it takes 5 justices to decide to change the law. And so there is no reason, given what I just said about no federal courts disagreeing, that the conservatives would take this case unless they were planning on changing the law. Because why on earth, for example, would Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh and Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito get behind taking up a case that cemented as super precedent abortion rights in the federal Constitution? They don't. That is not their MO. So if advocates are in a headspace where they're trying to find a way where this works out well, I need us to do the math, because we have a year functionally between now, when we're having this conversation, and when a decision is going to come down from the Supreme Court in this case. And that gives folks an opportunity to agitate at the local and state and federal level for protections, because we have no reason to think that it is good news coming down. And if we try to wish cast anything else because that reality is too terrifying, is too scary to really look in the face, then we are really doing marginalized folks a tremendous disservice, let alone setting ourselves up for, I mean, a lifetime of failure. We don't get this ground back if what we do from this point forward is stick our head in the sand about the fight that we have.
I think the other thing I worry about, worry about all the things, is the media education that I feel needs to happen. Like, not everybody is
Listen.
Rewire's News Group. Not everybody is Jess. Like, I'm just saying. So,
Yeah.
like, if there is not a ruling that literally says Roe v. Wade exists no more, I get worried about how it's reported.
Yeah, it's going to be reported as a win.
And that it's going to be like, not bad, right?
Yeah, no. We need to expect this because we've already seen it. Like, this was a terrible term for civil rights, by the way. But you would not know that if you
I forgot about that.
You would not know that if you read the recaps in most media where they said, you know what? Pretty centrist court you got there. This is terrible. It is not a centrist court. We cannot do that. So yeah, I am with you 1,000%. And the other reason why this worries me is because I said that there's a coordinated political campaign happening here in the amicus briefing. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? So we have the state of Mississippi saying, like, what we really want you to do is, uphold our law. And if you're so inclined, strike Roe versus Wade. But really what that's going to do is just kick it back to the states, right? You're going to hear this a lot. Like, what this is going to do is kick abortion back to the states, kick abortion back to the states. First of all, we don't do fundamental rights on a state by state basis in this country. Like, I know a lot of folks would like that to be the case, but just as a baseline, we don't do that. But let's say that that is what the Supreme Court sets up here. What everybody needs to know is that there is a pile of briefing by very serious legal scholars right now that is telling the court that there is just no fundamental way that abortion can be squared in the Constitution. So they are making a fetal personhood argument. That is not something that they necessarily expect the court to bite on in J. V. Dobbs, but that is something that they expect the court to bite on the next abortion case. Because the other thing that the media is going to forget is that there is going to be a next abortion case. The one thing that we know for certain is that there is always another abortion case until the Supreme Court says there are no more abortion cases. So there is the fetal personhood argument being teed up, and it's not being teed up by fringe actors. It's being teed up by these same advocates who will launder the next case to the court. So people just need to know that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're never having me back on.
Listen, I wasn't in a great place before because this is what we work on. There hasn't been a great place in it in a while. And it was kind of the hope with, the new administration. Not everything was on fire in rePRO all the time.
Yeah. Well, but that's the other thing about this case, right? Like, you talk about an administration change. The Supreme Court had this petition during the Trump administration. It thought about taking this case a whole lot before it actually decided when it was going to take the case. So anybody thinking that it isn't 1,000% political, let me disabuse you of that notion right now. It absolutely is.
Yeah, kind of got my hopes. Not up. I'd never had real high hopes, but as it kept dragging on and kept coming up for conference, there was just this little smidgen of maybe.
I had the opposite reaction, but that's because I was having flashbacks to Masterpiece Cake Shop, where the justices thought about Masterpiece Cake Shop, I believe 13 or 14 times. So very close to the number of times that they thought about this. And each time it got me more nervous because I was like, man, they're trying to change the law and they're given a good think about how they do that. That's the only thing that I could come up with. And so each time they were like, oh, the Supreme Court didn't act on the Dobbs petition, I just could feel my stomach tightening and tightening, and then when they just granted it, I wrote about this, if I'm just rambling at this point, but it's all like sort of Supreme Court tea leaf reading. The question that the Supreme Court originally granted was such a Trojan horse. It's, do states ever have the power to ban abortion, elective abortion, before viability? So it's like you can already see all of those cues, right?
Yeah.
And from there, the window has even shifted further. So this is a bad faith case from top to bottom.
I mean, and a lot of the tea leaves haven't been subtle, right? The last good abortion case was basically like, y'all, come on, you gave me one we just said was unconstitutional. Can you change it up a little bit and then we can play ball? That's basically what the Chief Justice said.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, can we talk about Texas again for a second?
Yeah, of course.
Because it's just, this is another one of those little details that reminds me, because we were talking about, the folks will be like, any decision that doesn't just completely strike Roe versus Wade is going to be seen as a win. So let's say that the Supreme Court upholds Mississippi's 15-week ban. That means that Louisiana's 15-week ban goes into effect. And so we were talking about where folks in Texas would go. Well, they go to Louisiana as one of the places. And then Louisiana would have a ban at 15 weeks, while the federal courts then are considering how to use the reasoning, the language from that decision to uphold Texas's 6-week ban.
Right. And some of the steps are already there, because I feel like, didn't somebody also pass a 12-week ban?
Yep.
So okay, if 15 weeks is okay, then what about 12?
Yeah.
You can just see it coming of getting pushed down and down and down. And then the personhood argument has already been started.
Exactly. And the court has this teed up, right? The briefing is there. The state of Mississippi's merits brief to the Supreme Court that they just filed was all about quoting Justice Roberts in terms of his concurring opinions in places like Citizens United, for example, moving the needle along. Justice Alito, really showing how conservative dissenting minority opinions get laundered through state legislatures to then become majority opinions at the Supreme Court. They did it with union rights. They're doing it with abortion rights.
Okay, since we're talking about terrible tea leaf reading in the Supreme Court, the other ones that have been really stressing me are religious refusals.
Oh, yeah.
And seeing the tea leaves in the Bostock case, and just there's so many things I'm worried about, but that's the next level of we're just going to start seeing so many religious exemptions to rights.
Yeah, we got a little lucky this term in the Fulton versus City of Philadelphia case. And again, I think they just kind of masterpiece cake shopped that. So, for the listeners who may not be aware, that was a case that involved a contract that the City of Philadelphia had with Catholic Social Services for support in placement of youth in foster and adoptive services. And Catholic Social Services had sort of uniformly decided that they weren't going to be doing placements in queer families and LGBTQ families. And the City of Philadelphia found out about it after a media report, sort of an investigative piece of journalism. And the case went up through the federal courts, and the Supreme Court effectively punted and said, Catholic Social Services had complained when the City of Philadelphia yanked their contract and said, you're discriminating against us on the basis of our religious objection to same-sex marriage and same-sex couples. And the court punted and said, basically, the facts of this case make us have to decide a particular way, but left open the door for really this kind of religious exceptionalism from civil service, which is what I think we are going to be seeing in the Kavanaugh court, right? That's really sort of the direction that conservatives are trying to take the law, which is that, functionally, First Amendment protections for religious practice can be weaponized so that they are a sword to injure people that you don't like, and also a shield to protect you from, legal liability for when you're violating civil rights. We are gonna see a religious objection to critical race theory, for example. We are going to see a religious exemption made to any type of enforcement on vaccine mandates, for example, despite the fact that all of those things are traditionally considered constitutional. You know, that's the Hobby Lobby effect, though, Jenny.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's not professional, but that's just kind of how I have to end it whenever I talk about the Hobby Lobby case, because really, they did us dirty on that one. It's bad.
Yeah, it feels so long ago and so much has happened, and like just feel like every year I just keep watching it get like better. We get like this great ruling, but I'm like, okay, but I see all the underpinnings of where it's going.
The other thing, and Amani and I talk about this a lot too, is I'm really not looking forward to the Amy Coney Barrett opinion in Dobbs that then gets pushed in my face as some form of feminism. And we're already seeing this in the briefing. You know, there's a litany of amicus briefings filed by right-wing religious ladies who have said that actually the feminist position is being anti-abortion, and here's why. And so, you know, it's just, I think we're going to have to hold a lot of space for folks in June, because we'll have a lot to be angry about. Because, I mean, obviously, even if we win, right? Like, okay, so we win in Dobbs. What does that look like? That looks like the landscape doesn't change. And the landscape is really bad. So that's not a win. Like, okay, things didn't get functionally into a greater crisis than it already is, right? So, like, we're going to be told that's a win? Like, I'm not going to want to accept that as a win. I'm going to be mad about that. So, like, there's literally no way that this case comes out other than the Supreme Court saying, our bad, we're not going to hear it at all, where I'm not mad.
Yeah. Yeah, because for sure, status quo is not a win at all.
No. You know, and so, like I said, 4 to take a case, 5 to change the law. There's no reason to think we even get status quo.
It's going to be a long year. I can already, like, long decade. I don't know. It's just been like the marathon, the ultra marathon. That's what this last, like, whatever has been.
That really lands with me as a Coloradan, because folks do a lot of those things out here and I don't understand it. I always assume it's a pathway to homicide, but like, I don't get it. You know, the other thing too is that this is a decision that's going to be coming down as the country gearing up for the midterm elections. And there's no way to not talk about this case without also talking about that reality, because we know that, you know, conservatives at a minimum are going to use this as a massive political push. That's going to be a massive fundraising push. I have long said that religious conservatives especially don't actually want the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. What they want them to do is just render it functionally irrelevant, right? Like legal in name only. That allows them to continue to fundraise off of it in hot election cycles, but makes it impossible for anybody to actually provide or access care. And that's my true nightmare scenario here, is like fetal personhood is obviously terrifying. And that's like the dystopian sci-fi future that nobody wants. But a world where, you know, Republicans and evangelicals are able to hold power by continuing to fundraise off of this imaginary ghost of legal abortion when it does not exist. Like, I want to stab something.
Okay. So let's wrap it up with something, at least I was going to say hopeful, but I don't know about that. People, I'm sure, are frustrated and angry. What can people do right now? So what can our audience do? What actions can they take after listening to just this nightmare of things happening?
Oh, so many things. Well, so always, if you're financially able to support local abortion funds and independent clinics, and I mean, we love everybody, but really, truly, like, you know, support your local grassroots organizers and advocates if you have the financial means. Agitate at the local and state level for reproductive health protections if your state does not already offer them. So what are the kinds of protections that you could ask for. You could require state insurance exchanges to cover contraception and abortion care, for example. You could require that your state affirmatively recognize Medicaid funding for reproductive health care services, for example. You could require your state protect abortion access at certain points. And there's models for that. Some states have already stepped up to do so. So those are things that can feel very good. This is an excellent time to have conversations with people in your neighborhood, people that you see, people, just in your community. I know we're like Delta's bonkers and like things are not necessarily as open as we want them to be or as safe to be out. But as we're talking about all of the ways in which the media is about to faceplant in reporting on this story and the ways in which people are just taxed in their own lives, this is an excellent opportunity for us to all be ambassadors in our own spaces. And it can be a little weird. And, that's obviously if it feels safe and you feel supported and all of those things, but there's a joke in my house that if you give me 30 seconds, I will turn the conversation back to abortion. And I try to kind of do that, And so that is an opportunity where even if it comes up, just and little things like, I think that's really important. And then the rest of it is find support and moments of joy in your own life, because the battle is not going to be over in June. The battle will not be over a year from June. One of the things that we know is no matter what the court rules, people will need to access care, and people will access care in a variety of ways. So we just, as, folks who care about those people and about those spaces, need to be prepared for that reality. And I think that there are a lot of good groups out there who are starting to take on the more difficult and grimmer realities of that. If, when, how has their legal fund for folks who are facing investigation around potential self-managed abortion. There is an excellent opportunity to advocate the Biden administration lift permanently the FDA restrictions around medication abortions, particularly if states get in the business of pre-viability abortion bans. Medication abortion is going to be increasingly important. If you are in a state that has telehealth bans around medication abortion, that is an opportunity to agitate around. So there are pathways, there are things that we can do, from what feels like big actions to little actions at the federal level and even at the local level, things like advocating for comprehensive sex ed. Honestly, that may seem like something that is not related to whether or not the Supreme Court can ban abortion at 15 weeks, but they are absolutely related. So if you can get your school district to pass comprehensive sex ed, if it does not have it, that recognizes positive consent, that is affirming for everybody on the gender spectrum, all of those things, those are all steps in the right direction. And are they mitigating steps? They are, but we have to start somewhere.
Well, Jess, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my
As
gosh,
always, it was a joy to talk to you, even if it is about horrible things.
Really? Was it? I mean, no, I appreciate that.
Stressful.
Next time we'll set it up so that we can have it with a cocktail or something, so that it's at least oof. But thank you as always. And again, to listeners, just abortion's legal in all 50 states. And a lot of the next year is going to be about trying to confuse that reality. And so we can't let that happen.
Okay, y'all, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jess. As always, I love talking to her. She is so smart and knows so much about all of the legal side of this. And I think I forgot to mention earlier, she's also co-host of the podcast Boom Lawyered with Imani Gandhi. If you all are not listening, make sure to listen. I listen to them all the time. That is where I get all the legal side of this repro stuff. I've learned so much from them, and I cannot recommend their podcast enough. So please make sure and check it out. And with that, if y'all have any questions or you want to suggest a topic you would like us to cover, as always, you can email me. I'm at Jenny, and that's Jenny with an IE at reprosfightback.com. Or you can reach out to us on social media, and that's at Repros Fight Back on Facebook and Twitter, and Repros FB on Instagram. And other than that, I will see y'all in 2 weeks. For more information, including show notes from this episode and previous episodes, please visit us at our website at rePROsFightBack.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at rePROsFightBack and on Instagram at rePROsFB. If you like our show, please help others find it by sharing it with your friends, and please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.